leave it to you. Please tell us about yourself. This is your session. If you want me to come in, I'll come in. If you don't want me to come in, I'm perfectly all right. So it's all yours now.
As I told you earlier, I always like interaction, so it'll be good if you can come in now and then and ask me a few questions also. So that will make it more interesting. Yeah. About myself, what is there to say? Just that um, I was practicing as a lawyer from 1980, and then in 2006, I was introduced to mediation because, as you know, the Madras High Court started mediation first, and then I was in the second batch. And from the moment I was trained as a mediator, the bug bit me really hard. And of course, from then I have been a mediator. And from 2009, I have been doing only mediation. I've stopped litigation. And the next stage of it was sharing whatever I had learned in mediation or my passion for mediation with others. So I would participate in all these training programs that were conducted by MCPC. And as we went on, I realized that whatever I had been taught in the beginning was not enough, because my experience with the parties had made me realize that we need to have something indigenous and we need to understand the parties at their level. And so I would have to know more techniques. And that's when I started interacting with certain psychologists here. And I also started reading up on psychology and philosophy. And I used to make notes for all my training sessions. And so then Bharat Chakravarti, who has now been elevated as a judge of the Madras High Court, one day said, "What are you doing with all your bits of paper? Why don't you put it together as a book?" And that made me think about writing. And then I put it together as a book called Resolve to Resolve, which is more about the philosophical aspects or how our logic or philosophy has thought about perception and cognition. It's not strictly on mediation, but it helps us to understand how our thinking perspectives have to change. Because basically, I think that any resolution or any attempt at understanding has to be addressing the thinking process. And that is why I brought in those aspects. And in all my sharing of knowledge, or wherever I try to explain to people that how it can be done, I bring all these concepts there, because I think that is more pertinent. Especially so because I think we have had a rich tradition. Unfortunately, everybody thinks it is, Hinduism or connected with religion. And so that is why when you said spirituality, I was excited. They're totally different. And especially if you see even our Upanishads, which means sitting near. So that means listening, understanding. And that is what mediation is about. And so that sort of excited me to think about, uh, especially on this topic when I was thinking. And I must thank you, Vikram, because when I started thinking about this topic and tried to put thoughts together, I accidentally came across a series of lectures by Dr. Radhakrishnan called The Essentials of Psychology, which deals with mind and soul and all that. Because generally, whether it is philosophy or psychology in the West, they think about the brain as the organ and the mind. That's all. But whereas in our concept, it is totally different. There are different layers, what we call as manas, buddhi, ahankara, and chitta. So that explains how, if you look at how we look at things, especially in mediation, anybody who comes in looks at all the facts, or looks at the facts that are pertinent to them, and they are not able to move beyond that. And that is what is the first perception level. That is buddhi. Sorry, manas. That is manas. When you are able to focus on what is relevant or what would give some meaning to the particular situation, then it becomes buddhi. And the whole thing is centered on this ahankara, which is I. So I think spirituality is something which is a movement towards your inner self. It is finding the balance there, finding the harmony within the self. Unless the inner self is in harmony, you will not be able to understand the environment or the situation around you. Today in management, a lot is being said about understanding yourself to understand others. And of course, they talk about Bhagavad Gita and all that. But looking at why we are not able to move beyond ourselves, why we are not able to actualize, which is chitta, why we are not able to move beyond whatever we think are our needs. When I was thinking about that, I felt that it is more of, the anchoring of the I, thinking that I have to be satisfied, my expectations have to be met, and more on what I have surrounded myself with. So there are a lot of superimpositions. So to learn who I am, what do I have to do? The first thing I have to know, as psychologists say, that we must know what can be changed and what cannot be changed. There are certain factors that can't be changed at all. Even in mediation, I have found that certain matters can be mediated, certain matters cannot be mediated, or certain things cannot be changed how much ever we want, for people to understand that things can be changed. So if we talk about change, then in the learning process, what is it? One is, as I said, we have to understand what can be changed and what cannot be changed. The second is understanding what are our choice and what are the alternatives. Do we really understand what are our choices? What are our alternatives? Are we looking at the larger picture? And I think that is where spirituality comes in, because spirituality is, like they say, Indian philosophy is actually called as Darshan Shastra. That means to see. To see means just not to perceive by the eyes, but to really be aware, to understand. And so they say there, that in any evaluation or any understanding of the situation, first there must be a sense of purpose. We have to connect with whatever is around us. We must be in search of harmony. We must be able to understand what are the values there, and we must be able to understand the beliefs there. So all this contribute towards what we say is to see. So do we do that? And if we look at that, see, most of the time, what do we think is knowledge, or what do we think of ourselves when we say I know something? When we say I know, we think that everything about that particular situation or that act we have knowledge about and we are very sure about. But can we really say that that is the truth? So that is why this concept of Manav Rina and Manav Rita actually attracted me in this. Now, Rita is something which is said to be the truth, but it is situational. It is not absolute like the word Satyam that we use. So, truth itself is seen as absolute and situational. And Rina is the obligation. And that is why your idea of the spirituality and mediation attracted me. Because from the moment we are born, we are obligated to people around us, to things around us for certain reasons. To our parents for whatever they have given us, to our teachers for whatever they have taught us, to so many people who contribute to our well-being, to the person we are and all that. So they say that at every point of time, there is an obligation, and we have to recognize that obligation. And that is where this spirituality in mediation comes in. What I see here is that most of the time we really don't realize, and as I said, we look at these entitlements and we are not able to look beyond that. When I say obligation, most of the time, I'm sure you would have also realized that people talk only about their rights, or whatever they are entitled to. Now, how is this perspective of rights, how has it come to be anchored so deeply in us? When I was looking at it, I find that it's mostly again a conditioning. It's because of the social proof. It's because of what is considered as a norm. Now, is rights alone enough to establish something? Is truth alone enough to get to move beyond the conflict space, to find out what can be done? If we look at that, in a very objective way, we find that we have to understand what can, more than that. Often, I'm sure you would have seen that there is a sense of righteousness in people when they interact, and there is a what can I say, a self-reflexive conscience. Because of that, there is an emphasis on what has to be done. So these rights also, or these norms that are prescribed, seem to be something based on the duties that we think is due from another person. But we don't realize that it has to come from us. And that is why I like these words Dharma and Karma. Because Dharma is about sustaining the power of what is right. It is not a law, it is not a code of ethics, it is something more than that. And how do we understand that? To understand, I think, more than anything else, it is the experiencing. Because in a conflict space, one tends to react only because of the experience of frustration, because of the experience of loss, or something which they feel has crossed the boundaries of normal conduct. So what happens is, when there is that kind of a frustration, people tend to think that they have to react. So they are not in a space where they can really understand the situation properly. So is that the situation where we have to be reactive or to be responsive? Looking at that, I understand these words attention and awareness in different perspectives. I feel that most of the time when we say you have to be attentive, we are focusing on something, on an idea that is already there in our mind, and we tend to just look at that. So what happens is there are more of superimpositions or that, or we are just looking into a tunnel and we are not looking at the larger picture at all. But when we are aware, what happens is there's more of experiencing, there is more of realization. What Professor V.S. Ramachandran calls as qualia. You can't explain it. You look at a pink rose and you like that rose, it's just the experience of that color or the smell or the way you see it. You can't explain it to another person. You can say, I saw a beautiful rose, that's all. But you can't explain the experience, like a sunrise or a sunset. Maybe you stand on the beach and you see it. But then, so that I think is the knowledge. So to get to that knowledge, there must be more awareness. There must be more of a conscientious responding to the whole thing. But are we doing that? And I think that we don't know, because we are not trained to be objective. That is where the rights and obligations come in. Once we realize our obligations, then we learn to be objective. And I think being objective is what spirituality is about, because then you distance yourself. You are able to move away from there. So, see, when we talk about efficacy, when we talk about self-determination in mediation, what are we saying? A person must rationally think about it, must be able to choose from whatever is there, make an honest choice, and then, of course, they have the freedom to make a choice. But how often we have seen that it's really not that kind of freedom, or what shall I say, an observed and calculated choice that they make. Most often it is something that they come to they make a choice because they have a predetermined way of thinking about the whole thing. So I think bringing spirituality or understanding spirituality enables a person to be focused, to be resolute, to have rational control, and to be able to realize what has to be done in the particular situation. And that is why it is very, very important. Unless we understand the feeling. Now, what is feeling? Feeling, again, is an offshoot of thought. So unless we are able to catch the thought and say, okay, I'm angry with this person, my partner has fraudulently taken away the money, so I'm angry. If I make that statement, I must be able to catch hold of that thought, and I must be able to observe, now, why do I think he has done something fraudulent, or how have I come to conclude that? Only if I'm able to catch that thought and analyze it, I will be able to get out of the anger or hurt or whatever is the feeling that I'm going through. So that process, how do we understand? And that's why I like the word karma, actually. Karma is divided into three parts, actually. We think it's naturally action. Every action has a equal and opposite reaction. That's sort of a Newton's law only we think about. But actually it has three parts. One is what is unalterable, things that cannot be changed at all. That's how these actions will take. The second is volition. You have a choice. You must decide what you have to do. And the third is the potential in the situation or potential in the person. Now, I think these three together beautifully bring up the concept of mediation and spirituality also. Because there are certain things which we understand is the situation, unalterable, maybe. Sometimes it may be alterable. These are the basic facts which or says limited resources. We have to deal with them. So that is unalterable. But then when we come to volition, when you make a choice, how does it happen? I must know completely about the situation. I must have a desire to make a choice, and then I must make a choice. But are we doing that? See, that is why I have a problem, as you always say, about training also. Because once you get trained, what happens is you only think about, okay, this is reactive devaluation, this is a bias, this is that, and then you proceed on that. Instead of that, if we allow it to homogeneously move, to help the parties to explain themselves, then it becomes a totally different scene where they are able to understand that volition is for them to really be aware of the situation, of the consequences, of what is there itself first, more than the consequences, then make a conscious choice. So there must be a desire to know first, then desire to make a choice, and then make a choice. Only then volition is something which is really in the true sense exhibited. So we have to understand that ultimately, whether we talk about volition, whether we talk about uh, uh, what do I say, a choice, what are we talking about? Most often it is the morality or moral issues on which these decisions are made. And I like this Jonathan Haidt, he uses the example of an elephant and a rider. He says that the rider thinks that he has to move to the left and he tries to move the elephant to the left, but the elephant will move to the right. He will not be able to control at all. And he says rational thought is like that. And so he analyzes the whole thing as, he says, any thought is about care and harm. It is about fairness. It is about being oppressed. It is about authority. It is about betrayal. And so he says there are opposite. We think of these terms in terms of opposites. If we think of care, we think of harm. If we think of fairness, we think of being defrauded. If we think of betrayal, we think of loyalty. So he says these come in pairs, so we are not able to move beyond that. And so he uses this elephant and the rider to say that because you are thinking in a particular manner, you tend to move in that particular manner. And that when I was thinking about that, I thought, especially in the context of spirituality, I thought that if we are able to objectively view this, move beyond that, uh, look at it contextually, and look at the situation where help the parties to understand that they will have to perceive this as a situation where, yes, they have been given an image, an identity, even because of their self-image, an identity, and they have to understand that they have to move beyond this identity to understand the larger picture, or give up their identity in the sense that they have to understand that this is not the only way to look at the particular situation. So what happens is, for example, if I want to buy a car, say I want to buy a high-end car and I have decided that I'm going to buy it. Whether I have the money or not, I've decided I'm going to buy it. So once I have looked at this car and I looked at this particular color in the showroom and I've decided, what happens? I sort of get an attachment to that particular car. And the next few days, all my thoughts are only on that car, nothing else more than that. So my attachment becomes a desire. And from that, if by some reason I'm not able, or the money that was promised to me hasn't come in, I'm going to get angry, I'm going to be frustrated. And then what happens? I start blaming other people from that point, or blaming other circumstances. I don't look at why I need that car or why I got so fixated on that car. But then I start blaming the whole situation, or blaming the way I am in life, or my circumstances, or blaming other people who could have done, or I expect them to do something. And so ultimately the whole thing takes over, because of which I am totally unhappy. But on the other hand, if I'm able to catch that thought and if I'm able to understand what could have happened here, so I think in that sense, this spirituality and mediation is One is the knowledge. Once we listen to the parties or we are able to interact with the parties, create some sort of a rapport, or we understand the situation, I think at that point when enough information is there and people have been able to discuss or have a dialogue about the whole situation, then what happens is this knowledge is objectively seen both by the person who gave those information and by the person who is listening to them. So what happens is some kind of awareness, or more than that, a consciousness about the whole thing comes in. And once you're conscious, you become objective. And that is where I think the spirituality comes in. And it is very, very essential for all of them to move beyond their initial I-ness, as I said, to understand that they have to share the information and to understand their obligations in this situation. And that is why today what is called as reflective practice of mediation, I think, becomes very, very important. And going into some other factor before reflective practice, I think the most essential thing in mediation, which is essential for spirituality, is also listening. How often we say we listen, but are we listening in that sense? Even now, when I am talking, of course I'm listening in a way to my thoughts in my mind, but am I, or will I be able to listen if people are talking here? Will I be able to listen to those people? Because now I am fixated on delivering my presentation. I don't think I will be able to listen to other people if they were going to talk to me now. So there is what I think is ethical listening, which is more than reframing or summarizing or whatever is taught in training. I think being heard is what people want. And so in mediation, the first aspect, or in spirituality itself, because that helps me to evolve as a person, I think ethical listening is very, very important, because I come with a certain set of values and beliefs and opinions. Unless I am prepared to listen to anyone, whether it's a conflict space or otherwise, I will not be able to gain knowledge. And so to be open to information, to be aware, I need to be to listen ethically. And to listen ethically means to move beyond my whatever thoughts that I have in my mind on that particular act or situation, to move beyond what is my reaction or normal reaction to such a situation, to being open to receive more knowledge. And so ethical listening here, I feel, is to make that connect, to invite that other person who wants to share information and make them comfortable enough to share that information. Be non-judgmental and make it clear to them that we are not judgmental. Persuasive and motivating in a way that you help them to bring out their deepest concerns and fears. And I think that listening is part of will come in only when we are in harmony with our own self. If we are not in sync with ourselves, then what happens is we tend to react, or we tend to demonstrate how we know about the situation or what we have evaluated about that situation. And that tends to upset the rapport that we will be able to create with the other person who's trying to give us information. So I think that ethical listening comes as part of the spirituality practice, and that is very, very important. And once there is a proper listening and enough information, and we also help the parties to listen ethically, in the sense we say if you go on interrupting, we can always say please don't interrupt, but more than that, helping them to understand why ethical listening is important, for them to understand this, to be aware of the situation, to make a conscious choice, and to educate them on proper listening. I think that is more important than anything else. And once that is done, there is a chance for reflection. Until then, there can't be a chance for reflection. And mediation is all about reflection and making a choice. And reflection again has to be objective. It has to be a consideration of the parameters that are available at that point, the change in circumstances. It could be the change of choice, it could be the change of alternatives, it could be the change of perspectives. But what we are looking at is the courage to move beyond our entrenched positions, to finding out what could be I won't even say mutual advantage. I don't like the word win-win actually. I would say more of a benefit for everyone, or something which would give comfort to everyone. And that can happen only when there is a reflection. And the next stage is introspection. So once we listen carefully, then we reflect, then it's possible to introspect. So that is where we are honest with ourselves. That is where we understand that this is reality and this is what we have to accept. So there is a kind of understanding, there is a kind of acknowledgement, there is a kind of acceptance. And I think all this together sort of builds up into a state where you go from or the parties go from the agitated state to a state of normalcy, in which they are able to think beyond what are the other triggers that help them to move into the conflict, and they are able to sort of objectively view what are the choices they have. So it's very, very important that so earlier you were also saying about mind states. I was also thinking about mind states, and I was thinking, is that, I mean, mindsets and mind states are two different things. Now, most of the time, we are determined. We have a conditioning, and we have a opinion about various things, and so there is a mindset about the way we are going to. But is that the mind state that we can be in? Mind states can be changed, and mind states can change only when there is a lot of ethical listening and there is introspection. And that introspection can happen only when we are not thinking. See, most of the time, why are we in conflict? Of course, we are thinking of entitlements. We are thinking also that this is the ideal. This is how it has to be. Now, a code of ethics itself is sort of a standards set because of ideals. So I think moving beyond that ideals, and that is where I like our concept of dharma, because that helps you to decide what will be appropriate for that situation. And so I think any change in mind state has to be when there is a mental understanding of what is the kind of perception we have. Do we sense our perception? Are we able to understand which part of it is conceptualized, which part of it is the truth? Are we able to move beyond our constructs? Are we able to dissociate ourselves from memory, in the sense, of course, everything gets, even a word that I say is connected to memory. But are we able to dissociate ourselves from memory? Because anything that is reproduced sometimes is not something which is voluntarily done, in the sense that it is thought through. So in these mind states, is there a recognition? Is there a mindfulness? And that is where I think being conscious of ourselves and being tuned into our inner harmony matters. Unless we are tuned into our inner harmony, we won't be able to be really conscious. Dr. Radhakrishnan actually has said about volition that it is the conscious antecedent of an act. If I do something, that's because I had decided to do something. So he says, he calls it a conscious antecedent of an act. And so he says there must be some deliberation and a choice. No, but when we are talking about deliberation and a choice, then there must be some knowledge. But is there knowledge? Most of the time it's not that at all. So what we have to understand is that first we have to have control over our thoughts, control over our words, and even our body, because our body language can also exhibit something. So I think the first step is, as they say, whatever is the situation, then the feeling about the situation. Once the feeling is there, then there is a perception about the situation, and that sorts of leaves a mark in your memory about the situation. And so later when you realize, like it's like touching something hot, then you put your hand into your flame, even a candle, then there is heat, then that gets stored into your memory, and next time you see a flame, automatically that gets retrieved. So most of it is like that. Most of the situations have a memory part somewhere, and they resurface to affect your thoughts. So I think consciousness is moving beyond all this, and that can be done only when we are able to move ourselves beyond all this by being very sure about what we want to do. And that is where I think our yogic practices and all talk about being very centered. And in that way, I think spirituality and mediation, if I can sum it up, I can say first, in spirituality, what spirituality teaches us is that we have to understand what is the intention of any act. Even in a mediation, we have to understand what are the intentions of the parties. Then once we understand the intention, there must be some sort of an inquiry, an analysis or getting facts, and then a regulation of the information, understanding what can be done. To a certain extent, there can be verification of the facts, or trying to prove or to establish that this is all that is available. But more than that, to move out of the friction area, one needs to be objective and one needs to actualize. And for that, we need to be conscientious and we need to be very sure of our inner self, or our understanding of the inner self, I would say. And that, I think, as a mediator, we are obligated to do when we take on mediation. Unless I am in sync with my inner self, I don't think I would like to do mediation, because I think that I would then reflect whatever is the disturbance within me when I handle a mediation. Most often I have found some example, for example, when there was a case of a boy who was being sexually exploited by his own father. I mean, that was a situation which I couldn't accept at all. And I'm sure it exhibited in some way. Because I could recognize the father's nonchalant attitude, bordering on arrogance after that. I'm sure he realized that I was not going to listen to him compassionately. I think that is where it's very difficult, but then unless we are able to work on ourselves to move towards that, I don't think we will be doing justice to mediation. And so I think, as I said, this Manav Rina is in mediation, is our obligation to be true to ourselves, to understand our inner self, and to be centered, and only then we'll be able to help the parties. So if I would like to sum it up, I would say that efficacy in mediation, or effective handling of a mediation, is possible only by mindfulness of the mediator, a comprehension of what is, and the conceptualization of the potential. And for all this, we need to have spiritual bearings. And I think our whatever we do in mediation, we have to consciously develop this sense of spirituality if we really want to, if we care for those parties in front of us and we want to connect with them.
I think that's the most important thing. Starts with the mediator. It starts with the mediator and that aspect of it. But interestingly, I started a series called Mediators, Mediation and Spirituality. And the first episode was like people from various countries, and no one associated spirituality with religion. Like you said, they actually understood that it was a different thing. But Umaji, you have to also throw light on the soul and the importance of that, or the connection of that in mediation. So now you have to tell us about that.
Yeah. So when we talk of the soul, what do we think? We think it is again an identity is given to the individual soul mostly. It is very interesting to see that in both in philosophy and psychology, what they call as the self, the understanding of the self, the concept of the self itself, is a little different from the East and the West, if you see. And for us, it is the realization, or the ultimate, they call this Trivarga, no? Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. This Moksha is supposed to be the stage where the soul is. So again, according to our practices, the soul is the understanding of the self, or as I said, being in sync with the self. ultimately moving into what we as nature ordained us to be is the soul. Whereas souls in the Western concept is totally, I mean, different religions have different thing. I don't want to go into the religious aspects, but the concept is totally different there. So that is why I think spirituality is attributed more to the East than the West. The soul is, and the understanding of the soul is the inner self or the potential of the self. That is what is seen in most of our philosophical writings.
But I think we need to maybe explore this a little more and get it into the mediation. Also, because why I'm saying that is because the connection between the soul, listening to the soul, all those aspects, are they important? How does that work? Because definitely there is maybe, I mean, science might not have been able to bring out things, but in terms of experience and the experiences that you have had and how you felt, because Pav, before that, Pavitra, who was before that, she was talking about certain moments in, of course, look, she doesn't practice as a mediator, she does counseling, but she said there are certain points when you feel there is a divine intervention, something divine is happening. So those aspects, I think, also need to be discussed in terms of mediation and where the soul fits in. Something, if there's something that you have experienced on that.
Yeah, I think so, because as I said, when we are in sync with ourselves, then we will be able to handle the others around us, and somewhere they know that that care and connect can happen. There have been some magical moments, like for example, it was an extreme case, of course, where this child was adopted and the parents had fallen apart. And, he was, the father was uh, addressing the child as this property, because he said the child had been given an adoption to him. And so he was saying, see, I am responsible for this property. So tomorrow, if she goes and marries somebody, she does this, and I am responsible for this property. So I said, this property has a name. Can you tell me what is the name? And then he gave the name, of course. And as you said, the way I was able to sit and understand his situation, of course, I had help from his wife. She had told me that I feel sorry for him because he had been abused as a child and he has very confused thoughts. So it's very difficult. And so I was able to probe a little further after that. And because she gave me that hint, I was able to understand. And then when I started talking to him, he said, I want to give a gift to my child. I said, okay, fine, give it to her. So he brings a big bar of chocolate, Cadbury's and a Titan watch, and he gives it to this child. And he says, see, for your birthday, I was not there, I'll give it. But, I'm planning to marry. I'm not like your mother. But only if you consent, I will marry. So this child, she was just 8-year-old. She didn't know anything. So I just said, look, your father just wants you to say yes. If you're happy for him, he wants to know whether you'll be happy for him. So she said yes, because she heard the word yes. It was just these are difficult situations where you know that you can't be really evaluative or advise them or anything. But then, I understood that because she had given me the background, I understood that somewhere along the line, he was yearning for attention. He wanted to be liked, and that hadn't happened. And he was looking for affirmation somewhere. And it was very difficult. I could have told him to go to a counselor to get sorted out. And sometimes I found that counselors are not able to help. And when they come back, I have been able to help them. So it's a sort of a chain reaction, somewhere along the line, they are able to break out of it. That's why I said, if you are grounded, if you are able to show them that, yes, I'm here to listen to you. You may, okay, I've murdered my wife. Okay, I'm listening to you. Why did you murder? Then, they go beyond that. They come up with their innermost concerns. And as you said, understanding the soul is again the potential in the person. See, how most of the time they have not recognized it because there have been allegations, and there have been so many instances where they have had to react to situations. They are not thinking about how they can understand the situation. Now, most of the time, what do I want to do? I want to put up a narrative which people will believe. And if I have said that narrative for 5 times, I start believing that narrative. That's what happens. And that is where I think, if we understand that I am so and so, and I'm proud to say I'm so and so, that kind of attitude, if you are able to build in those people, then they are totally different. That is why I feel today changing mindsets in older people is going to be difficult. We have to address them in the schools or colleges, tell them to understand that they have a mind and they can think about it.
Well, actually, why I keep getting into the soul aspect of it is because, I mean, you talk about disturbed souls, you talk about reaching into the person, reaching out to the person. Now, what are you really reaching out to? Because I still feel that that aspect of, because there was something, I mean, discussed in terms of authentic self, and I'm going to keep taking it up in sessions. Authentic self. What is the authentic self? Where does the soul play a role in that? So something on that. I mean, how is something that you would have thought about in that context?
Yeah, authentic soul. Again, see, when you said reaching out, it's not that they have something and I'm just pulling my hand there and grabbing it and taking it out. It's not that. They may not be aware themselves that they are capable of certain things. Okay, they have the potential, they don't know. But when I'm talking to them, I understand. See, for example, there was this a lady in a maintenance case actually, where she was the mother of this husband who was coming, and he was a no good person, but this daughter was asking for some fees for her college and all that. And I came to know that the grandmother was a nurse. So I said, I mean, you were the head nurse in the hospital. I'm sure you have helped so many people. Now, what would you like to do for the grandmother? That's all. I mean, granddaughter. That's all I said. So the nurse in her came out and she offered to do certain things. So somewhere along the line, you will get clues. That's all I'm saying. See, what is the soul? Their innermost conscience. See, ultimately, what is the soul? I am going to go to bed today after a murder, then I'm not going to be able to sleep for whatever reasons, maybe in self defense also. But that is going to replay in my mind. So, in my innermost soul, I feel is my conscience or what I am aware of, whether I am doing the right or wrong. That is why this concept of dharma and karma are very, very nice, because they don't judge you. They tell you, okay, these are the possibilities. Now, what do you want to do? You make an informed choice. So that is why it's totally different. And as you said, yes, we are connecting with the soul in a particular way. They feel that they see what they haven't spoken to their lawyers or to their immediate family or even acknowledged with themselves. For example, of course, today the situation has changed. About 10 years back, when I had a matter where this guy was gay and he had got into a second marriage, and then I had to talk to him, and then at one point, he did admit to me. And that took a lot of effort, I agree, because he was scared about opening up. But then for him, that became a moment when I could see that whatever burden was on him had relaxed. He was able to be more open after that. So I think that is where, reaching into a soul or connecting with the soul is where you make that kind of a rapport where they are able to come out with their innermost concerns or even acknowledge their innermost concerns.
Yeah, but I really feel that part, because look, we talk about energy and bringing in a certain energy, there being an energy in the mediation, all that. So I think we need to also maybe, I mean, are we going to first of all be able to understand it? That's a different thing. To be able to at least explore it and talk about it, so that there is much more that happens than that. I mean, maybe that formal concept of putting things down in certain points, that this is what is happening, stages of mediation and all that. We have to go beyond that. So that's why I just want to explore it as whatever we can.
Very true. Because when we say energy, see, whatever it is, it's always a reflection. I mean, you walk on the street, you dash against someone, that person is going to say, hey, what are you doing? Because that's automatic reaction. I remember when I was young, there was this Voice of America, which would start in the morning saying, if you meet someone without a smile, give him one of yours. And I think that's a very nice statement. I used to listen to it before going to college, and that was nice. It made my day. And I think that is where, when you say reflective practice or creating a rapport, I think ultimately it is only showing what can be done. That kind of a reflection surface, if you are able to give, then they will be able to respond to that. And I think that is more important. And as you said, I don't think a formal today, even putting mediation into a particular format, I'm not agreeing with that, because I think but the problem is today success ratio. Everybody wants to show what is their success rate. So what happens is, in even parties coming in, we were having a talk with some mediators from Singapore, and they said, look, people are coming in paying for all the time and money, so they want some thing at the end. So we are very evaluative. Then is there an informed choice there? That's what I asked them. So ultimately, I think if we are looking at mediation as only a settlement process, then it's one way to go. If you are looking at mediation as a process for parties to understand what are their possibilities and help them to make a choice with which they will be able to live with, then that's another pathway. And that is where spirituality comes in, not in the former.
Yeah.
So that
Because yeah.
one is business like. Yeah.
Because when I look at, look, I mean, of course, when I look at mediation, I'm talking about mediation as it happens all over. So I go down to the village and I say, in that village, there is that one person that people go to. They know that person, they know the name, they will go to that person. Now, what does that person actually bring? So I'm taking it from there, because obviously there is no discussion on any formal setup there. It is informal and it's happened naturally. It's not that someone said that so and so is what you have to go to. It is over time, the maybe the conduct of the person, spirituality. I mean, I don't even know that what words to put it to that. But there is this individual who is helping people resolve their disputes, and it's happening in every village. So I mean, what all do you think plays a role in that person and that mediation?
No, I think basically it's the trust that those parties repose in this person and how that person discharges the trust also. But unfortunately, as you know, these panchayats and all that have become very communal based, and it has taken a wrong path. But I think originally the intention was only that. See, when the kind of mediation, or shall we say, the kind of settlement processes that we had earlier, like for merchants, one particular format, these people's families, a different format, and all that. So it has been there. Everyone wanted to try out various stages before they would go to court. But today, yes, if there is a person who is respected and who is able to be objective about the whole thing and is able to help the parties to understand. I understand that in Karnataka there is one Swamiji in a mutt who does this. He has people who sit on a forum, and then the parties have to give an application for mediation. The other side is sent a notice, they come there, and both sides present their case between those community leaders. And they whatever are their concerns, whatever are their claims, all that is discussed, and ultimately they come to some sort of an agreement which those people endorse, and it is written in a stamp paper. And he says even the High Court has sent some matter to that particular forum now. So obviously there must be something, and because the Swamiji is sitting in another part of the hall, I think maybe it adds some sort of religious significance to those parties. And they say irrespective of the religion, people come there from all around those areas. So that's sort of created a kind of trust in the whole process. And see, today people rush to police stations. Why do they go? They want some force to be extracted. That's all. Now, why do I think that some force to be extracted? Because I'm so conscious of what are my demands, and I want my demands to be met. So instead of that, if I'm able to think about talking it through with the other person, or finding out what can be done, I don't think many people are going, or as Giripala Singh has done, if we have people who can be contacted in police stations and then sent to mediation.
Because Well, look, the way I am looking at mediation is probably I'm removing it from, I keep saying that colonization affected dispute resolution, and obviously courts became the place for dispute resolution, and that conditioning of the mind it'll take time. We'll have to start doing that. So that definitely has to happen. Panchayat, I definitely keep talking about that correlation with panchayat and mediation is going to be the worst thing that will happen, because villagers know exactly what the panchayat is doing. Interestingly, I had a discussion with some teachers from Champaran, West Champaran in Bihar. So these people obviously had been told about mediation by some people, and those people had connected it with the panchayat, and they clearly said, look, panchayat tells us what to do, and they go to the extent that certain panches who actually thrash people also. They bash up people to make sure they follow what that. So I had to first take that out of the head. Look, that is not mediation, and then tell them about mediation. And then names came out. So they told me about these people and how they're doing it and how they've helped people and how they conduct the process. I can send you the link to that recording also. So it's all out there. These people exist. The only thing is that we have to be able to, I mean, I'm just trying to put it down. Maybe we're using words, I mean, soul, spirituality and all that. But I feel that that part of it does play a role there. And that is what connects people to these people. And this is like what you said in Karnataka, what's happening. There is some connection coming there. Now, it's not an authority aspect of it. Is it or is it not? Also, maybe of course needs to be discussed. But like what you said, people are coming on their own. They feel there is something that happens there, and if they go back happy and they're actually resolving it and without it being forced to do it, so there must be something to that whole environment. So I think that's what I really want to actually explore through the symposium.
Yeah, very true. Because I think if we want to see, my concern about this mediation bill itself is that it starts from the Singapore Convention. We are talking about the villages here. So we are not talking about enforcement of agreements. We have to talk more about how do we get people to participate in a mediation and to express their concerns. So I think primarily, I think we have lost sight of where we have to start from. That is another aspect. But here, I think even any see, if we are looking at mediation as a profession, then we have to understand that the primary thing in mediation has to be to address the concerns of the parties, not to see whether I'm going to get 200 settlements or 300 settlements and show it on my face page. Now, that's not important. But most of it has become like that today. Now, what is your percentage of success? So I think to a certain extent that is impacting the real value of mediation. I think that shouldn't be done at all. And for that, to move it into the core of what mediation ought to be, I think this enablement of people to think for themselves, to be conscious of what are their obligations first more than their rights. I think that is more important. And once they understand their obligations, see, for example, now that the amendment to the Hindu succession law has come and in co-personal property, everybody has a share. Yes, but you have to understand, at least in deep down south, the mama plays a great role. So the wife's sister, brother has to pay for a lot of gifts at the time of marriage, subsequently for all the functions, and say it's an ordinary family. And he's already taken a loan for the marriage, then he will continue to take loans for all the other functions and whatever gifts that he has to give, and then ultimately whatever property is left he has to share it with her equally. Means there are a lot of disputes today because of that. So many cases have been filed. So sometimes we have to understand the cultural, and that is where the people that you are talking about will help. See, if there is a village elder there who will tell them, is it reasonable for you to, if there's just 1 acre of land and half of it has been sold for the daughter's marriage, and then she comes files a suit for partition, then this village elder may be able to tell her, is it reasonable for you to ask? And they will be able to understand. See, the right is for her to have half share, yes, but whether it is a right of her to ask for that half share again. So that kind of, that is where the soul comes in, as you said. The soul is where you actualize the situation, where you understand what will be the right thing to do, and you will be comfortable with what you have done, the choice that you have made. You must be comfortable with that. And that kind of thing will happen only when there is a person who understands the situation there. See, for example, when I came into practice, I remember people from Nagarkoil, in Kanyakumari district, will come. They will fight for the smallest extent of land. They would fight for even 10 rupees or 20 rupees at that time. I remember they used to file second appeals for that. And my senior used to ask, why are you spending so much money? They'll say it's a matter of honor. And I have to show to this other person. And that is where I think those are the issues that we can deal with in mediation, asking them whether it is really worthwhile for them, or why are they doing it, or is that what they really want, or are they doing it because of what they think they have to do, or what are the norms that are set by society. So those are factors, when you feel them, then they will be able to understand.
No, because that's why, look, why for me this is important. These elements are important because, like I said, connecting to those people, and like you said, touching someone's soul, and the person to be able to reach down there and then understand things from that perspective, and leaving out all this legal aspect around it. To be able to do that, not everyone can do it. And why I want to get there is because we need to value those people, because those people have been lost out in the whole thing, and we are saying, okay, whatever way, call it training, 40-hour factories. I call them 40-hour factories. Okay, I hope you don't mind that. But I'm saying you don't make mediators in 40-hour factories. These individuals who are out there, let's bring them out, bring them into the fold. And nicely, spoke about the mediation bill. My comments on that have been that, first of all, it has to be targeted to that village and that villager. And getting, I of course have been saying that we have the best law on mediation, which is conciliation, and it's simple, nicely put, that person can understand, doesn't need to go to a lawyer to understand the law. It's a basic simple procedure that they need, and at the end of the day, if they get a court decree sitting at home, that's when actually the entire impact is felt. So I know that of course that might not happen because the judiciary pressurizes the government to go in a certain direction, but for me that is mediation when that starts happening, and those people are brought out, and that is when I'm saying, oh, you can come out with whatever qualifications or anything, it won't work, because these qualities can never be put in a qualification. Do you bring
even communication for that matter? See, if we are talking about taking out all the negatives, what do we do in training? We are saying you must rephrase it, you must take out all the negatives, you must put it in this particular way. Do you think our people will be able to understand that? No. In each language it is different. In Malayalam it is in a one way, in Tamil it is in a different way. So we have to understand which culture they come from. See, even in Tamil Nadu I can say Coimbatore area is different from Madras area. So the people who come from there, I will have to address them differently than from people from here. So I remember even, see, for example, I remember when we were doing a particular training here in court, during tea, one of those advocates, very senior person actually, came to me and asked, which part of Tamil Nadu do you come from? And that was when I learned about language. And I said, why? And then he said, you don't talk in a particular lingo when you talk in Tamil. So I said, look, sir, I've been around Tamil Nadu in different parts, so mine is not the typical Tamil. And because you people want me to talk in Tamil, I use Tamil. So it's English and Tamil mix. So that's how, it's not the particular area specific. So he says, see, the other two people I'm able to fix where they're coming from. And so when they talk for some time, I switch off. But because you have a neutral kind of talking, I'm able to listen to you. And I realized even during training, this matters. See, when you're sharing some information with them, if you are going to talk in your particular dialect, it puts people off. I realized that only that day. And if it is for that, when they are seasoned people, how is it going to be when we are talking with people who are in conflict? You need to be in sync with them. You need to, you can't be different from them at least. You can't put yourself on a higher plane. You have to be there at their level. You need to sit, you need to crawl, you have to do that. So that kind of understanding will come in, I think, only when you are centered. You are able to understand that it is not about me, it is about what they are facing.
That's why I think I'm trying to bring out are that there are certain universal aspects that can connect people, and those universal aspects is for me that with the mediator, that person with the mediator mindset that I keep talking about, brings those universal things, so that those connections that are created are on a different level altogether. So language, anything, all that, you can go beyond all that. But in terms of in sync, interestingly, Ken Cloke in his session in the symposium spoke about, actually he was giving the example that some study has been done on these through speed dating, that you have these people, a lot of people in a particular room, and you go around talking to different people, and then they have found that the conversations that a person enjoyed, in those conversations their heart started beating at the same level, I mean, they got into that much of a sync. Breathing became, it's in the same flow. So in sync is actually something that actually happens, and physiologically it has been shown. So these are things that need to be brought out, that someone can do that to you in terms of a mediator bringing it in, and of course for the parties, how you create that whole atmosphere there. Those aspects I feel have not been discussed and need to be discussed, because there is something much more which is happening there.
Much more. There is much more. There's no doubt about it. More than that, I think it's for the mediator a constant learning process. Of course, every mediation is going to teach us something about behavior of parties or their expectations. But more than that, how I have reacted to the situation, or how I have been aware of what is happening with the parties. And I think that is a learning that I take from every mediation and every session actually. And I think unless I am conscious, or I am aware of how I am reacting or what is going through me, I will not be able to respond to whatever are their needs. And to that extent, I think uh, more than anything else, I don't think I should be focused on them. I think I should be more aware, or more receptive to what they are going through. I think that is more important.
In terms of learning from the process, I call it evolution of a mediator. I have a series called Evolution of a Mediator. So trying to show the same thing that, well, look, mediators are not made in 40-hour factories. These people have evolved over time, various, first of all, their own situation, their own upbringing, the values that they brought in, their family brought in, their, even to the grandparents to that extent. So I go down to that level to find out about that. And then their life experiences, all those things, all that makes the person, that mediator is a lot of all this that has come into it. So I keep saying that you are undermining and demeaning a mediator by saying that you'll make them in a 40-hour factory. And I feel very sad when I see those posters, make you a mediator, will make you. If it was like that, I think it's a little sad, but that's one thing. But in terms of that, yeah.
Even in this Delhi conference recently, one of those people was saying, we have trained enough mediators. MCPC has trained, so we have people. I mean, what is this qualified people to do? I don't know. Is there any mentoring going on? Nothing. I mean, that's a different issue. But what I'm saying is, we have just asked people to sit through a process. That's all. I won't even say whether they have listened. They have sat through that process. And then you let them out to be mediators. So is that enough? No. Instead of that, as you said, people who are naturally inclined and who have some ability to connect with people, if we are able to just give them, some motivation or some sort of a little help, extra help, that's all. And
Yeah.
then I'm sure we could change a lot of these situations.
Exactly. But I mean, these are people out there. Even saying that there are children in schools who have that ability. They're already doing it. And children trust them. I mean, that's what the main thing is. It starts with trust. Then their conduct, because the children are seeing each other. They know who those people are. The impartiality aspect of it, they've already studied it. It's not that it has been told to them. They've studied it, and then they go to those people, or those people are brought in whatever way. So that all children themselves understand it. And same way in communities, in families, people know who those people. In families, it is not every elder. In communities, it is not every elder. It is those particular individuals. So those individuals are bringing something. So to value that, first of all, of course, families, communities, everyone needs to do that, and then bring it. I've been saying that, look, it's not a profession, it's a way of life. So we have to also discuss that.
Yes. See, that is where this Dr. Radhakrishnan's Essentials of Psychology is very, very interesting. I mean, I was surprised that he spoke about psychology because we all know that he's a philosopher. And I was surprised that he was talking about this. But, he deals extensively with how the mind and thinking and all that has to be understood. And his lectures really, I think all college students have to read, I think, because he says, especially about volition, he says, um, unless you are able to understand your mind, your thinking process, then you can't say that any act that you did was voluntary. And so he says that the structure and function of every thought is you have to understand that the structure is an evaluation of the thought itself. So once the thought gets structured in a particular way, it means you have already evaluated. You have come to you have an understanding of a particular thing. So he says the mind itself is uh, is bringing together different mental states. He says you have to understand that it deals with knowing, feeling, and being willing. And I thought that was very nice. He says our mind not only knows, it also feels, and there must be a volition also. So the unity of all this only is the mental phenomena. And then he connects it to the philosophy, and I think that's absolutely wonderful because he again speaks about introspection and observation. And I think spirituality itself, as I said earlier, is about reflecting, introspecting. And when we say listening, reflection, and introspection, it means being objective. And I think that's where the mediator has to equip himself or herself, whoever is the mediator, to be able to reflect, to be able to help people to reflect, to introspect, and to be objective about the whole thing. Because I may know or I may feel that this is what has to be done, but if I'm going to tell those parties this would be right for you, I'm sure they are not going to be happy. So they have to make that conscious decision, and for that I think holding your horses comes only with spirituality, nothing else.
But in terms of mediator reflecting, I started a I started a series. I think I only done of one or two episodes called Mediator Reflects. So Michael Lang has written a book, and he's known in the world as in terms of reflective practice. So basically, it was done with him. So we actually, of course, we spoke about his book also with him. But then he actually brought in some people. He has these practice groups all over the world. So maybe you should, with him, set up a India practice group. So he had brought in one of that episode from his Irish practice group people had come. So what they actually do in that practice group, what that meetings that they have, what they do. So they actually did that. So he was saying that the first time that aspect has gone on to YouTube, which has been recorded. Otherwise, they don't record that.
Okay.
So that's interesting. I think maybe you should. I mean, fix up something with him. I think because he's really looks at that aspect as an important aspect.
Yeah, I think, see, unless you're able to reflect, um, how will you discriminate between what is good or what is not good? See, first, it starts with discrimination. So, only if you are able to be able to discriminate, then you will be able to be objective. So, I think this introspection and reflection, all that has to come together in mediation at every level, both from the mediator's point of view and from the party's point of view. Of course, the parties will, as you said, parties will not be able to do it because they have those layers of whatever feeling and entitlements they had, and all that has to be removed. And for them to have the courage to move out of it and comprehend that they have to introspect, I think that is where the soul search or connecting with the soul happens.
Exactly, because these are words that we use. So I guess you said soul search or whatever. These are words used, but actually there is something there. I mean, there is something there and needs to be explored, because to be able to get to that point that someone searches the soul, as also everyone can't get people to do that. So someone brings in something that creates that whole. Is it an energy? Is it whatever is happening there? But to get people to do that is also not something that everyone can do.
Because you say that, I remember there was a case, I mean, that I have never come across anything like that, where this girl, just after school, she was engaged to a boy because the family, this boy had a rare blood disease and he was being treated in UK. And the family was very rich and they wanted to get a wife for him who would take care of him. And because her father felt that she would have a chance to get educated there, he agreed and got her engaged. But ultimately, there were some differences, and the marriage didn't happen, and so there were some criminal complaints and all that. And it was referred for mediation. And this girl came. The only question she asked was, "I had good marks. I would have got a free seat. Now, why did my father do this to me, and why was I caught in this situation? I could have gone ahead with my education." So I said, "I don't want you here at all. I'll talk to them. You needn't be here." And then I was talking to them, and this boy was totally blissed because he has gone through life getting everything. And even after he was engaged, he was posting pictures on Facebook, and all that, and which she didn't like, and all things that happened. Okay, so when I started talking, the boy's father, after some time, you said the soul search. I asked him, why, how could you do this to her? You made her go to your sister's place and do this, do that, all that. And then at one point he said, I was only thinking of my son. I didn't think about what would happen to this girl. I'm sorry. And it was a very peculiar situation where he agreed that they would pay some money. And after her graduation, if she was going to UK, they would take care of her in UK. And this girl's father, who was so upset and who had filed the complaints, turned round and looked at this boy and said, Ayushman Bhava, means be well. And I thought that was a great moment, because the soul searching happened to and until then both of them were so wild. You should listen to their words, the way they were saying. But once it came to the core of what they could have done possibly and why they got caught in this situation, and that is where that point, and all that this girl asked at that point was, what did I do to get into the situation? And the father actually told me for more than a year he had to sit with her through the night because he was afraid that she would commit suicide. He didn't let her out of his sight. I mean, what kind of trauma they had gone through. But that was a moment when everybody realized, and more than this boy's father paying something or offering something, okay, he could afford it. But this girl's father, after all that, turning around and saying Ayushman Baba, I think was the best thing that could have happened.
Yeah. So I think these are the important things, and then that whole transformative part
Yeah.
of it, actually to be able to transform to the core. So that aspect of it, when that happens, that whole atmosphere, that energy flow, and all that. I mean, those are things which, yeah,
You could call it divine, you call,
exactly, exactly. Yeah. I
but
mean,
ultimately it is, I think, being in sync with who they were ultimately.
yeah. Like you said, that you can call it, you can say, you saw a beautiful flower, but to experience it, I think the important thing is to be able to experience it, and then that is something that you do get to experience in such situations. And I think for a mediator, that's also something which is very satisfying when you actually experience that, because you're part of it. You become a part of it at that point of time.
That experience, once you learn to discern and then you experience that, I think that is real knowledge or understanding of the situation.
Exactly.
I think
So
that
there
is,
was there was one comment I just saw, listening. But I was just thinking from listening to the heart and listening to the soul, to be able to reach that point within yourself, like you said, that the person with, first of all, the mediator reaches out into themselves and that spiritual development, whatever it is, and then to be able to then listen to someone's heart and soul. I feel that, I don't know, I mean, what your thoughts on that is. So that's because listening is a word used with mediation a lot, but for me, listening to the heart and soul.
that's what I'm saying. See, we saying listening to the underlying issue, listening to their innermost concerns and all that. See, ultimately, as I said, these narratives that they have built either to tell others or for making others believe or for themselves to believe, all that as we go through the process, we remove it. And then at that point where they start telling about whatever is there in their innermost heart, then I think that is where this real listening happens. See, I remember reading somewhere that a doctor in Los Angeles used to tell his young doctors who came in that it's easy to go to the see the patient and stand at the entrance of the room and ask how are you. Say a person has a hip fracture, they only have to lie down flat, nothing else can be done. So you just go and ask how are you, is there pain today, and then walk off. The patient is going to say something, you walk off. But then you go near the patient, hold the hand, and say, how are you today? That makes a difference. And I think that is where that kind of a persuasive listening or ethical listening is what we are going to say. There are some advertisements for banks saying hum hai na, no? So it's something like that. So you are there, I am there for you. That kind of listening is what has to happen. See, in this case of the boy who was being sexually harassed by the father, I asked this boy, he was a 14-year-old boy, I asked him, how are you able to concentrate on your studies? Then why did you keep quiet? For 7 or 8 years he had gone through this trauma. He said he was threatening that my mother would die and I didn't want to lose my mother. And then he said I was able to switch off because his mother was working and she used to keep late hours. She was not there. So he said I knew how to switch off, and I would avoid being with my father. All that, and looking at that boy at that point of time, I was wondering how he could have managed. But when I came out, and the mother came and said, Uma, thank you for listening to us. I don't need a settlement. I don't need to win in this litigation. I just wanted somebody to understand what we are going through. And I'm happy that you listened to us. That's enough for me. And I thought that was the success of that mediation.
Yeah.
See, somewhere, listening, we can always say, I was there throughout. I was listening to every word they said, and I've been able to summarize and tell them whatever I've heard. Yes, fine. But are you able to connect? And that is where
Exactly.
your skills are.
Exactly. Yeah, that connect word is the important one. And actually listening from your heart and soul to someone's heart and soul, that is the connect. And if you reach that point, a lot of things get taken care of there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So,
why today, talking about empathy and all that is fine. I think you need to go beyond that. Just say empathetic listening or being empathetic. Oh no, more than that. They need to connect somewhere. I'm not able to put it in an exact word, but I think that is where this connection with the soul or something comes in. Where they
exactly.
understand. Yes, I will be able to talk to this person, or I'm happy that I've poured out whatever I had in my heart. That's
Yeah,
enough.
yeah, because it's sad when I hear the word be empathetic. I mean, you can't be, you are, you are, and then are you being able to connect to things beyond? Absolutely. So, Umaji, now you will have to again, I'm using the word concluding remarks, but these topics are not concluded. But interestingly, that book that you're talking about, Mr. Radhakrishnan's book, it was put up, the link was put up in that WhatsApp group. My problem is I don't read books. So now what you have to do is maybe you'll have to give me the essence of that book. There is a series that I started. It's called Talking Books. but there I talk about books with their authors, because I don't read them. That is the line there is talking book, because some of us don't read them. But maybe we can also do books that are written by other people and the authors are not there to tell us about it, but are relevant to mediation. Maybe the essence of it, maybe we can have something like that. That might be something useful, because I feel that you'll solve my problem because I don't read them. So maybe we should do that. So yeah.
Talking books and all that, no? So I think that, yeah. But see, this Dr. Radhakrishnan was interesting in the sense that he was talking more about introspection and observation, as I said. And I think spirituality, as you said, connecting that with mediation is about, I mean, if the reflective practice of mediation is what we are talking about, it is more about being in sync with yourself. And that will happen only when we listen with the third ear, as it is said, and we are able to introspect and observe what is happening to those people. If we are not conscious or aware of what they are experiencing, it's more the experience. They may not be able to say it in particular words, but if we are able to a certain extent, gauge what they are going through, and I think that point when you meet and they are able to understand that, oh, we have understood what they are experiencing, then they connect, and that is where I think that is the point to which the mediator is obligated to focus on. And I think that is where all mediators have to think about, that it is not just about getting parties to come to a settlement. It can happen in any compromise, it can happen in Lok Adalat, it can happen anywhere else. But what they are looking at in mediation is something more, an understanding of themselves and an understanding of the situation. Understanding of, because they don't have the understanding of themselves, they are in the conflict space. Unless the mediator is able to understand themselves, the mediator will not be able to help the parties to understand themselves. And I think that is where it's sort of mutual. Sometimes the understanding of the parties of the mediator will help the mediator to understand what are their own innermost fears or ideas also. So I think in a way it's a sort of a spiritual interaction where both the parties and the mediators discharge their obligations by understanding and being aware of whatever is happening in that particular space.
And I think that's the transformative aspect of mediation. That's the transformative aspect which needs to be brought out. But interestingly, you said the third ear. So now, from that, I'm thinking, what about opening the third eye? I think maybe that is also needed to be done.
No, that is why I make the word Darshana Shastra for our philosophy. It is to see, that's all. To see means to be aware, to understand, and everything. And I think that comprehensively describes even spirituality.
Absolutely. So, Umaji, thank you very much. These conversations are going to continue. These topics
And I'm
need.
listening to them later.
Yeah, you have to listen to the other speakers.
I have given you some ideas at least from this conversation that we've had.
Oh,
And
very important. I think that what you've.
in any way, if we can take this forward to the grassroots level, I'll be really happy. That's all.
No, absolutely. I think that is what is required, and that's where that's where things are going to happen. That's where things are going to change. So, thank you very much, and I'll see you soon again.